Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Explicit Measure Podcast. How's it going?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm really enjoying these more than twice a week conversations. I know we had a lot of recordings. I just enjoy it. It's fun with you guys.
Tommy, you can call me anytime. You don't have to be on a podcast to talk to me.
I know.
Careful what you wish for.
There's these things called phones,
Changing my number.
Teams. Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to start calling you at 6 a.m, right?
Hey, what's going on? No, I want you to call me early in the morning and go, yo.
Oi,
That was for
Oi.
you, Adam.
Yeah.
That was for you, Adam. So today is a momentous day for weeks and weeks and weeks. The number of the episodes for podcasts on Thursdays has been odd. And today, in the first time since, I don't know, what episode were we on? Like 100 something? When did Charles come on the podcast? I don't have the searchable.
CW Charles Webb when he was on here on a fateful Wednesday.
On a Wednesday. And he ruined our numbering schema, and Tommy was sorely thrown off. So now we are back on schedule. We now have Thursdays are even. So you're welcome, Tommy.
That was a long time ago.
Was it?
Yeah. It was last May, I think.
So that was over 100 episodes ago?
It was like last May or June. Charles Webb.
It feels like yesterday, guys.
Data marks.
It feels like yesterday.
It does. Talking to you guys is it just is. It's
warms
like
the cockles of my
goes
heart.
by so quickly.
Warms the cockles of my heart. Yeah.
I don't even know what that means. It's something like I heard somewhere.
Yeah.
Excellent. So there's been some announcements on the blog here, and as I think about what we were talking about this week, we had Lisa on the podcast as a special episode yesterday. She came to talk to us about this new feature called editing your data model on the web. So basically editing relationships, making measures, awesome stuff. Excuse me. Now there is another announcement from Lauren talking about pre-announcing better Power BI report integration with OneDrive and SharePoint. And while these features don't appear at the surface to be directly related, I do feel like there's potential here for some connection between these two features. So overall, this is something that I've been very nervous about. There wasn't many details when they put this on the Power BI adoption roadmap or Power BI roadmap. I guess what would it be, the wave? They call those things the roadmap.
Power platform.
Power platform roadmap. Yeah. So I didn't know how this licensing was going to work. I didn't know who could make stuff in the content in SharePoint and OneDrive. So it looks like, again, I was more worried about the licensing piece of this. But it looks like if you're a Power BI Pro user or have premium licenses attached to you, you can go in and you can upload Power BI files to SharePoint or OneDrive, and you can directly view the report without having to publish anything into PowerBI.com. You can view the report, you can interact with the report, and there's actually some interesting in the future type bullet points that they added on there. And this is really interesting around where opening report, auto-saving edits, edit directly in the browser seems really interesting here. So when I read through the article, I'm curious your thoughts on that. Sorry.
No, how can you make what's a pre-announcement to a new announcement?
Yeah. That's throwing me off.
I guess this is an FYI. Maybe?
I read it. I'm like, wow, like this is an announcement of new features coming up. Like this,
we're pre-announcing
really
episode 300.
How do you pre-announcing the announcement that you just gave me?
Pre-announced episode 300. Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah,
we're yeah. So that was humorous to me. Cool. Like joking aside, though, yeah, like this is so. How have you guys interacted with files, right, in the past? Like, essentially, all your PBX stored on SharePoint, and then I just sync the SharePoint folder with my local. So it treats it like like this experience, kind of, but it's not, right? Like, there are these weird situations that I've got in where, for some reason, my local version didn't sync right with SharePoint, and then it creates it as this weird
number named thing.
Yeah. So the fact, just from the development standpoint, that kind of takes this away, right? Because it's just now a unified location, it sounds like, or that's the way it's going to be presented.
So it says so this is what I was leaning into here a little bit. It says in the future we will incorporate greater parity with Office and plan to allow you to auto save edits in Power BI Desktop directly to the cloud. So it sounds like you're right, Seth. Like it's this idea or this concept of, you know, how you go to like PowerPoint or Word, right? And you can go into your Teams environment, click the file that's in the SharePoint location and say open in app. The app opens and it just keeps auto saving itself back into that SharePoint location. It sounds like this seems very similar.
It makes sense a bit when it comes to the other things in the release wave. For example, we had an entire episode on that. All Power BI installs will be part of Office installs. So if you install Office,
that's true.
In all those applications, you can edit on the web.
Yeah, correct. And it's like a web
SharePoint, right?
It's blurring that line a bit more between what happens locally on your machine with desktop applications and what happens in the web as well.
As long as I still get version control, this makes me very happy, right? Like because this also
right?
does this also unify like the other implementation of kind of sharing, like you deploying your Power BI report directly, right? Like that method
syncing,
I don't
know
like.
What you're talking about.
Yeah, you know how it
syncs.
syncs.
Yes. If you connect to your report from the Power BI service and rather than browse computer, that will sync like whatever updates are made. I don't think so. I don't think this has anything to do with that.
Okay, so this is more just the interaction in the Office ecosystem in SharePoint where, hey, you cut down these barriers. That's awesome. What about you don't like this, Tommy?
No, it's not that I don't like it. It's more I'm just so indifferent. I don't know how necessary it is. Like,
I think this is going to change how people interact with Power BI a lot.
How so?
So I think about what Lisa was talking about yesterday about being able to edit a data model. And this note here, it says here at the very bottom, we can already edit a data model in the web, which is just part of a PBIX file to begin with. And then right here, it says edit the report directly in the browser. So again, this is what I kind of see Microsoft doing a lot of, is they're trying to bring full parity between desktop and what happens inside a web browser. So if we're getting to the point where I can put a file, I can have it located inside SharePoint, I can edit the report side of it using the browser, and now I can have Emily's tool where I'm editing the model inside the browser. Like that could be I'm moving further away.
So I would
from
be
desktop.
moving.
You're going to 3 places.
I would be moving this from SharePoint to OneDrive.
I think SharePoint OneDrive is basically the same thing. How I view it.
But you're still going to 3 places based on that. Like if you're going to model the web, and are we saying it has all the capabilities like bookmarks, or is just moving visuals around? Like right now, the service still has very limited in terms of report
building
creation.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. And the reason I don't like building in the service is because when I used to build in the service, I could never get it out. Like if I built a report in the service, there was no way to download what that is, which I think has been remedied to some degree. I think there are still occasions where you get a little bit of pushback around not being able to get the report down. You might lock yourself into like a data set because the data set has an incremental refresh that you just can't download a copy of the data set now. But if you're on an XML endpoint, you can get a BIM file out, you can get the definition. Like it's getting a little bit more fuzzy. Like what is the rule now? Because my hard rule previously was never build anything in the web because I could build a file and I could never get it back.
But
that was and now that they're doing a better job of letting me edit in the web and getting downloads of files or potentially syncing those files directly with SharePoint better, making that experience more seamless. Okay, maybe I'm going to bend a bit more on letting you edit in the web now.
But realistically, the use case is like I've edited on the web a few times. I've created, but just to test it out. The only time I've done something production I've edited was because something broke and it was needed a quick fix. The report was
you left the filter on in the filter pane, and you're like, crap.
Yeah, who hasn't? Honestly,
let's be real here. Let's be real
here. But nothing where it's actually like pure development or taking longer than 10 minutes in the web.
Yes.
And again, those are always things immediately I would be doing in the desktop too to sync them together. It was just to get something up and running, but it's not like I don't like this. I just think, I don't know. It just seems like spend your money elsewhere. It's neat, but I don't know how much this is really going to be used.
I don't think it's going to be used for a developer. I think, Tommy, what you're thinking about is the pro developer, or the person who's working a lot and building reports over and over again. I don't know how much I would use this feature there. if I could get a better, again, if I'm like I'm leaning into the experience here a bit more, right? If I can get a real-time auto saving of desktop edits directly into SharePoint, and SharePoint can have a real-time or more real-time, acknowledging that there are changes with that file in PowerBI.com, I don't see why I wouldn't be able to link that file from SharePoint direct to PowerBI.com. And then if I edit it in PowerBI.com, I would expect those changes to immediately be pushed down to the file. So I feel like I want that experience to be working. So that way, whether I edit in desktop, SharePoint, or the service, there's always a current version of whatever that file is doing. If I had that, then I think I would be a bit more lenient on, go ahead, edit in the web. It takes it a second or two, and those changes then are propagated down to the file.
Fine, but then you still would have to publish it.
No, you don't. Not in that scenario.
No, okay. So the two scenarios, and before we go way too far into this, you're either syncing that SharePoint file with Power BI, which Seth and I noted, not the greatest experience, don't like it. Now, if you just edit the SharePoint file, it's not synced to Power BI, so you still have to publish it.
But I'm saying that this is changing that. I'm thinking yeah, your experience that you understand SharePoint syncing files today is not ideal. But if they're doing this kind of level of stuff where you can go view a file inside SharePoint, okay, maybe if you want to edit it, you don't go to PowerBI.com. Maybe you go to your SharePoint page and edit the file directly there. Okay, it's the same thing as editing in the service. You just don't edit in PowerBI.com's workspace. So I'm thinking there's got to be some kind of better synchronization between these different things. If you can increase the synchronization level and make it a bit more seamless between these different objects, yeah, maybe.
It's been a while, a long while before we've even gotten an enhancement to how we save files here.
That's true.
It would be.
I've got to be rebuilding something.
I love your optimism, Mike. It's fantastic.
I know you're not going to use.
What about the second part?
What about the words that you said tabular editor?
Someone's got to feel ideas.power.com.
What?
I mean, if no one else is going to use it, I got to use it.
So what about the second part of this pre-announcement to the announcement about sharing reports directly from these locations to end users? Now, mind you, caveat in here, this isn't a, hey, we're giving up the licensing. All of that is specifically laid out. You still need Pro. You need to be covered by Premium, which is interesting that it understands that, right? So now 80 in licensing or an E5. But one of the main tenets of the service was this is where you deploy to share things. It's governed. We understand what's being used and how it's being used and who has access to things. And now we can directly share off these locations to end users, not the edit mode, right?
Because if you share an individual report, Seth, it goes through if you're doing it in the service. I wonder if that synchronizes.
Now they did make the change to the service 6 months ago or whatever, to make it more like office sharing and everything else. So I'm sure there's a way we can now catalog and understand who has access to things, but it's certainly not in the service realm. I don't think.
I imagine
right?
they could be. Oh man, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Because one's a file, the others has its own ID.
Yeah,
they're not
it's now within the Office ecosystem. You have access to this SharePoint location or OneDrive, right? Yeah. So how, to me, that just goes there's two parts that make me
So
one is the administration aspect of Power BI service and sharing, and the other is security. Right, around people shouldn't be seeing some things with random links being shared. Granted, that holds true for all sort of data and documents.
Everything you can put it in Excel and share the same thing. Yeah.
However, what are your guys' thoughts? It makes it easier, but
I think it's going to be. I think this is going to be dangerous. Honestly, I do think this is going to be.
Out of sync people.
Well. I think you're going to get a proliferation of. Well, again, this is where I'm a little bit caught too, right? Why would I want to build a whole bunch of workspaces where if instead I can just give people a bunch of files?
Right.
My whole team, if we had E5 licenses and we didn't know any better, we could build a whole bunch of Power BI files. We could just throw them down in our SharePoint page and never even touch PowerBI.com. So that's interesting all itself. And then where does the activity logging go? Is that something we're going to catch as an admin somewhere? Does this use are we, if we're on a
Capacity?
premium SKU, are we using capacity now? Or is this,
Mhm.
or is this only a Microsoft managed capacity, right? So does this ever,
Now part of
Right.
this though is you can't set up an automated refresh. However,
that's true.
however, just because my processes follow service, follow automated refresh, follow all these things that have
Incremental.
been part of the ecosystem, I every single new user, every single one, or a business unit that does not understand the ecosystem of Power BI is already doing this. They're
Yes, they are.
sharing these files directly.
Yes.
Right? So, but at the same time, they all
That's
have
true.
to manually refresh the file. Somebody's got to manually refresh the file. So
Yes.
what's, like, are you really solving a problem by being able to share the report version of something to other
Well,
users in this ecosystem? I
maybe
don't know.
it makes sense from the dev point of view rather than publishing a report where you're in development. You just share the OneDrive. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
but
are gonna listen.
that's not how it's going to be used.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be like Mike, some positive energy.
Yeah, try to
here.
be positive, guys. Jeez.
But no, you're right. Like it can't sync with Power BI audit logs because it's
All right,
not a Power BI audit
in
log.
a positive light, what are the problems that this new announcement solves?
I mean, I think this is what this is opening up is it's opening up the ability for people to quickly glean an image or look at a report at a high level. Even now, like if I walk away from a client and they have a whole bunch of Power BI files that we've put in their SharePoint, I go back to them. Like I know the names of the report, but I don't get to see an image of the report. There's no preview. I can't do anything there. So I think from a development team standpoint, if I'm developing reports, I think it'll definitely add some value and help. To your point, Seth, right? There's no automation. I don't think I could see any automation from this where it would automatically load those files. That's going to be the next request someone's going to have is going to be like, hey, thanks for SharePoint, but I can't refresh the data. It doesn't refresh itself. I'm like, yeah, no dip. Like it's not going to do it. Like it will not refresh its information. So I feel like in that respect, I think people are going to expect too much out of it. So there's going to be like a tamped expectation around this. But at the end of the day, I do think like we're already doing this with Excel. We're already doing this with other documents. You should be able to easily share these things across the ecosystem. And, maybe my organization doesn't turn this on because we don't feel that you should be landing a whole bunch of Power BI files or previewing them or editing them inside SharePoint because this is a feature you can turn off. This will be administrated.
Oh, what's the first
well.
question? If you share this link to somebody as a report, they're going to be like, yeah, but the data is stale. Right? Like you'd have to manually report, like refresh it every time. So Power BI Park makes a funny comment in the chat where sometimes companies are like, it's cheaper to get somebody to manually refresh and send it out. Like,
is it?
Can you imagine? No, because you still need the licenses, right? I still need Pro, or I need to be covered by Premium. So you're still paying that.
Yes.
But can you imagine that loophole?
Actually,
you're like, oh, it's cheaper. I'm just going to hire. We're going to hire
a whole bunch of people to open the files, refresh them, and save them.
That was the first 2 years of my Power BI life. Yeah, because our ODBC connections didn't work. So we had,
way.
Oh yeah.
You lived my joke.
First 2 hours every day, getting in at 6 a.m. was refreshing reports and publishing them.
Oh man.
So we're going back to that. No, I read this article and it's like, cool. There's nothing that's like this is going to be detrimental, but I don't think it's going to be anything where companies are going to shift their process and they're going to be part of documentation. This is a one pager of like, hey, if you want to view things, but I don't.
Nobody said the magic word this morning.
Oh, it's not even close to that.
Nobody said that, Tommy. So of course it's not a huge organizational thing.
Or I don't think you're going to see a lot of even not like a complete shift, but I don't see. This is just going to be part of something. Did you know you could do? Wow, that's neat. And then everyone moves on. Except for all the problems we're talking about when it comes to audit logs sharing and that's out of sync. And
I think it's going to have a wider impact than that. I do also see. I want to see how. Well, there's going to be a deeper integration based on the screenshots. They have a deeper integration between desktop and the SharePoint OneDrive locations, anyways. Yeah. So I'll be interested to see how they're going to play this out, and if there's a way to. If they can improve my experience between PowerBI.com, these files, SharePoint, and OneDrive, I think in my mind this makes a lot of sense. And also, if you're talking about refreshing data sets, like we could be landing a whole bunch of thin reports here too, right? So these don't have to be necessarily
Oh,
No,
that's
they do.
interesting.
They do. I thought double click as a couple people might double click. Let me double click into what you just said.
Okay, yeah.
If you go, there's a
there a
link
note
to the
there?
documentation,
So nerdy.
and I think for right now, it's all import.
Yeah,
Okay, so they
there's
only let you look at import.
directory and
Yeah.
Live Connection wouldn't work with this.
RLS isn't supported.
That would be a
So
problem.
there, you know, just like our conversation with Emily yesterday, right? You know where I go right away. Like,
Yeah.
is there a link to technical documentation?
Yes,
Scroll
exactly.
all the way
It's
to the
like,
bottom.
where are the
Considerations,
limitations?
limitations. I mean,
Yeah.
let's see how it's gonna work right now.
It is on their roadmap. They did say in the future we would like to let you look at view reports connected to data sets in Power BI Service. So
Did
I
they say
think
we would like you to?
well, it just says
Because that
view
sounds like a pipe dream.
pipe dream. No, it says in the
Yeah.
future we will incorporate greater parity.
Oh.
View reports connected to data sets in Power BI Service. So it's not there right now, day one, but I mean, I would imagine that would be something you'd get to eventually.
Be great if the documentation is like, it would be great if we could do this.
Yeah, it would be great. Make sure you like and subscribe and fill it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, every documentation I want from Microsoft have it wouldn't be need section.
Yes, exactly. Anyways, interesting topic. I think this is very relevant. The only thing I would really make a note here is you can enable the public preview or you can turn it off. There are some settings that need to be enabled or disabled to be able to do this. So I believe those who are administrating, they're in Power BI environments or SharePoint, you may need to coordinate with your IT department to make sure you're either turning this on or off depending on what you want. I thought there was something concerning here that they mentioned at the top that there's a feature that is on by default.
On or off?
There's one on and one off.
OneDrive and SharePoint from Power BI Desktop Preview is on by default.
Yeah.
And requires an opt-out. The
to disable the preview.
Power BI files directly in OneDrive and SharePoint is an opt-in.
Correct.
So the saving part is on by default. That's fine. But I like the way they did that.
The preview is off by default. The saving is on by default. Yeah. Which would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, just be aware of those things. That way you can observe that. And that way you know that it's coming and people ask about it, you'll know about it. Anyways, good topics. I think that's going to be an interesting feature. Looking forward to seeing it come through. I like where they're going with things. All right, moving on to our main article of the day. After we were halfway through this thing, we got debated. We were debating pretty hard on that one.
It wasn't a big deal, but apparently it was a big deal.
Apparently it was a big deal. Apparently I'm going to make it a big deal.
Pre-announcements.
So we're going to jump into an article by Erica off of nightingaledevs.com. So this is our article for today. It should be in the link. I'll put it also in the chat window as well here.
Erica Gunn.
And so this is a very interesting article around, again, this is a very similar topic, potentially. Data exploration journey, the magic of collaboration. So this is a bit more about focusing on data and the exploration of information and data and working collaboratively to figure out, what does that look like? How do you explore data? So really interesting article. She has a really neat diagram. That's kind of a little chart that I think is very interesting to look at. I believe I did some ideation training a long time ago when I was back in my corporate job, and I feel like this chart showed up a similar chart showed up to this that I was working through, where you kind of like discover more things, and as you discover more things, you absorb more ideas. Like, so that all ideas are good ideas. We want to have a really wide net, cast a lot of ideas down, and then we kind of narrow our scope. We kind of throw out ideas that aren't good, and then we kind of broaden our scope again and say, okay, how do we solve the problem? And then we narrow our scope again. So this feels a bit like that, where you're trying to articulate the idea of, we have information, we have data. How do we get through this creative process of being able to design data exploration journeys or stories on top of your information?
Yeah,
Thoughts?
I agree.
I
liked the visual too, and I got stuck there, but probably in a different way, right? From this, but similar but different.
Hmm?
The point I wanted to make is that whether it's the exploration of data, or I suppose this makes sense on anything data related, but also at the very front end in delivery as well. Mm-hmm. There's always this curve, right? Or in their view. How do I do this on the
a
expansion and then
diverging or an opening,
contraction, right?
Yeah.
Well, it is expanding in focus and understanding like all of these different realms and hitting that overload point. There's the tipping point that comes down into focused analysis where you're going to spend a lot of time solving that problem. And whether that's on the front end or when you're building it, the same kind of process continues. The point I wanted to make is it's really critical, though, that's why it's really critical to have a very clear idea of what you're trying to solve in all of those stages. Because what happens a lot from experience, right? In when I first began in data, you'd get into these projects or something where you'd have a very large expanded scope, and then you'd be like, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to hone in on this thing. And you spend a lot more time honing in to try to solve something, and you miss the mark. And then you got to start over, right? Because actually you didn't really have a clear idea of what it was you were trying to solve with your deeper analysis, and or that equates to the same thing on the front end. Even when you go through this, find all your data sets, set it all up, did you deliver what the end user needed, right? And a lot of wasted effort can be introduced into these project cycles because you don't have that clear idea. So as I was like kind of looking at this chart of like expanding and then honing down, I thought about that, and just wanted to make the point that that's why it's really a really good idea to have a clear idea of, if I'm going to spend a bunch of time, what does that output look like? And that also stops you from going down into rabbit holes when you're doing that focused analysis, because that can happen too.
Well, and part of this is personality too. And I don't think we give enough credit to personality traits and how important that is in also our space and what can be detrimental and what can be really productive. Let me ask you guys, are you guys better working with teams or are you better working alone?
Depends on what we're doing, I think.
I don't know if people like working with me. I'm kidding.
Well, I mean, if I put this in the lens of the article here, I mean, one of the first kind of why collaborate elements here at the top here is define diversity of thought, right? So one of these opportunities to be able to get together with people who think differently than the outflow of a production of multiple people that have very different backgrounds usually produces something that is better than the sum of the one person. It's the term synergy, right, comes to mind. Right, we build a synergy around these people that have a wide variety of skills, and I think that's something that I've tried to put in to my company to some degree, where we have like, you know, people who are very app dev focused, we have people that are design focused, we have people that are model focused, right? And then if you have these different skill sets, when you bring them all together, you now have a very diverse thought on like, okay, how can you get to a better product as a combination of these things? Because then, you know, you're building better scrims in the background, so it makes it feel more app-esque, right? You're simplifying your data model to make it easier to consume and build measures. Like, there's a lot of aspects, I think, to this. I don't think you can do this on every project. Let me be clear. Because sometimes projects aren't big enough for more than one person. But I think the idea here is there are certain projects or there are certain things that you're going to do either for fun or finding people that are similar in nature to you. Again, I'm talking a little bit less around like the project in the company, because you're kind of like, in those cases, you're kind of stuck, right? Okay, you know, Mike, here's your project. This is your report you need to build. Figure it out. Like, that's a bit, I don't think that's exactly what this article is talking about. I feel like this article is talking about a bit more around, you know, how do you find like-minded people who like data, and how do you work well with them, and why would you want to work with them? Because there's things you can potentially learn from them. That's kind of how I'm reading it a little bit.
Yeah, and I agree with that, right? But I think to some degree there's kind of 2 points that we can talk about. One is obviously that, like the collaboration, team building, diversity, etc., versus the collaboration within a specific Power BI project as well, right? Because there are a lot of similarities between those two. But to answer your question on my part, I think there's a time and place for both. I enjoy working in both, like together and apart, right? Because a lot of what we do can be just data analysis. It's analyzing, understanding an area of business. You can't, sometimes that elicits multiple people, but typically you're on your own. You're trying to solve a problem, and that's not great collaboration areas. But building reports, right? Like putting together pages, making sure that we understand, like, are producing what the end user is expecting. Like, those are great opportunities for teams to collaborate together and talk through, like, bring different perspectives, bring different experiences, et cetera.
Which will be a lot easier on SharePoint too, by the way.
I do like Mike's point. If you think about one of team building, right, or just finding people to collaborate with, is diversity of thinking and skills is a really valuable thing. If you get everybody, like, if to Mike's point, if he hired the same skill set across everything, then when all those people get together, you just get yep, sounds good, right? Everything,
a very similar output.
We all agree. We all agree.
Let's
Do
go.
We agree. We all agree. It is the way.
It is the way. This is the way. Yes.
Versus, diversity of skill sets for, different areas of the report. Great. But sometimes that's where, bringing in a full-time analyst or bringing in somebody whose expertise over the years has been UI UX, right? Yes. Instead of Power BI, interject some really refreshing ideas around that challenge status quo. And I think dynamically, you think about the conversations that we have in this forum. We're collaborative. We're collaborating together. We don't all think the same way. There's some similarity in thought, but our personalities are different, right?
Right.
And I think that's what makes dynamic conversation, which is also what elicits new ways of thinking about problems and solving them.
And I'll take a quick high level. I think, Mike, something you said stuck out to me, where you're talking about the different people you're working with. Honestly, from a high level, regardless of the audience that you have, or the dialogue that you're going to have, whoever that person is, this really goes back to the importance of the communication skills and setting expectations on what are you supposed to get out of the project, or what are you trying to get out of this, whether it's me working with you, or me working with a stakeholder, or me working on building a report. Who's doing what are we trying to get out of this, regardless of if we're similar or not. It's kind of aligning expectations and having that over communication. That's something that I found, regardless of the project or the person or the skill set, is kind of setting that up from the forefront of what are we trying to do together, or who's going to do what, and what are we trying to get out of this.
Yes. I listened to a talk from Rob Collin. He was talking about very similar in this scenario, right? If you had someone sit down and write an app or a piece of code, right? The code that is the end of the project is whatever, 3 pages long, or however many lines of code that is, right? 300, 400 lines of code, right? That's the output of the project. The input to that project is a lot of communication and requirements and all this extra work that is trying to make sure everyone's on the same page. And there's always going to be this high volume of communication, clarity. You can't, when I'm building reports just for me, an audience of myself, it's very easy to communicate because I'm just internally focusing on what I need to build, what's helpful for me. But as soon as you involve other people, there is this need for higher levels of communication. And so it adds value, but it also potentially slows the project down a lot as well.
Well, and I mean, for myself, one of my, I think, biggest hurdles starting in the Power BI world, or just from a professional, was I like to take things and run. I would assume too many things. And I've really tried to make that one of the stronger skill sets on anything we do. What are the objectives and goals we're trying to get out of this? Yeah. And we're going to follow up on that. And here's what we talked about. Because I know myself, I'll just run with things and go, oh, well, I thought you meant this. And you either get the dissatisfaction with the people you're working with, or to Seth's point, you're not completing the goal. Take it on its head when you're actually doing it successfully, and you kind of have those communication in place. The collaboration could be one of the most fruitful things you do in a professional career. And those are some of the most enjoyable and things, kind of moments, and some of the things that I can still remember what I've learned from those projects where I was collaborating with others. Yeah, and I can think of both audiences.
So let's hang into where the article dives, and if we want to divert into Power BI and specific team projects, et cetera, we can. But because I think she brings up some really interesting points that we've talked about a little bit in terms of getting involved and engaged in community, right? A lot of the things, like there are several reference points where her recommendation around wanting to collaborate with others, whether that be a project that you're passionate about or find a way to plug in with people, is to join a community, find like-minded individuals that revolve around the same realm. And that's where user groups, right, where even this
Yes.
podcast and the chat, right, like the data communities and people that are already engaging in these conversations, that's where you meet them, right?
Correct.
And the important part about wanting to collaborate with people that I love about the point she makes in here is you need like you obviously want to be intentional if you have a project that you want to engage others, but it's about building relationships first.
I like that point a lot too.
And
yes.
and that is something especially I find recently, for some reason, and recently by like the last couple of years, is there are a lot of people that demand time without a relationship, right?
That's very true.
What's happening is the default for people who are community driven or who are out there or wherever is to just ignore the request because there's no relationship there, right? And that's where it's you if you're serious about something, you need to engage with people first, and a great way to do that is in spaces that these people who know data, who live it, who like enjoy interacting with one another live, and start to live there too, right? And that requires you to not just go to a meeting or show up, but to her point, put yourself out there.
Yes.
Join in the conversation, right? And understand that everybody is at different levels throughout everybody's experience, right? So just because you may be coming in on a low end, or because in the article in here, she knew nothing about R, so she engaged somebody who had that strength, but she had her own strengths, right? And that's where looking at this in the perspective of people bringing different qualities to a project is a value add. But just engaging, you got to put yourself out there first.
I totally agree with that one. I think of a community. So a couple of things that I would, so we're talking about community, people getting together.
Sorry. I just, Dan's comment, be careful putting yourself out there. That's how he met Mike and Seth. I'm sorry, Dan. I'm sorry.
Oh boy.
There are consequences.
There are consequences to these actions. Yes. Warning, your mileage may vary on this recommendation here.
Yeah. You don't know who you're going to meet, right?
So I would also echo this from areas for people who are newer to the Power BI community. Where could you get involved? Where would you find some similarities amongst others in this space? There's a lot of online communities, right? So there's meetups. There's now if you go to Meetup and you look up Power BI, there's a lot of user groups all over the world that are doing that. You can go to community.powerbi.com. There's also a bunch of community groups that have groups that are listed inside powerbi.com and helping people get together and collaborate. There is, I know DynaCube is like a stream every Saturday. There's a live stream that you can participate there. I know there's other groups that are participating on a early morning Saturday call just to kind of get together and talk about Power BI. One community that I'm really enjoying right now is kind of like the Deneb community. There's a lot of people building and visualizing data that's in there as well. That's a group of people that are very focused on visual things. So I really like that spin there is, again, I'll liken this to where my experience has been. I'm surprised. I'm a drummer. I've played drums for pretty much my whole life. But being a musician, when you play with musicians, you always want to find other people that are better than you to play with, because it always brings your level up to be able to like, oh man, that was really hard. These guys are really good. So in the same way, I kind of look for like people in the visualization space that are part of my band members, right? People that are doing things that I want to be doing. And so I ask questions to them. I talk to them. I build those relationships so that way, when I have a question to Rui Romano about all this code stuff that he's writing, I can be like, hey, Rui, I need some help. your code doesn't make sense to me. Or and I find a lot of things where, if you're an individual who's looking to figure out how do I break into that space? How do I start getting myself out there at part of the community? There's a lot of, again, one thing I'll recommend is Rui had a whole bunch of examples and things on GitHub, and I would read through his code and try and find things that are in there. And I was working on his code, and I would submit some pull requests back. Hey, look, I added some comments to your code here, right? It didn't make sense to me. It wasn't documented so I could understand it. So I added some enhancements to it. What do you think? And then we kind of would form a relationship. So you basically try to find areas where you can assist and help a project along. And when you jump in and help that project along, they're able to say, oh, look, this guy's or gal is willing to participate, is willing to jump in here and help move this forward. That's how you start building some of those relationships, I think.
And I want to take that a step forward where don't be afraid to getting or working on mentorship. Part of the amazing part of this community, and I think with the Microsoft MVPs, is if you really like an article by someone or really like that contribution that someone did, reach out to them, especially if they're Microsoft MVPs. Odds are they're going to be happy to help. And if you're coming from, I think, a sincere place too. I've done that. I actually reached out to Kurt Bueller about, I'm like, I don't know how you always create all these articles. I want to actually learn your process for your consistent, amazing articles. And that's something that I wanted to do, and learning from the best. Kurt's been consistently putting out articles, but
really good.
But even when it comes to the community, when it comes to if you're learning something specific in the Power BI space, or you're just trying to learn a new skill set, the reason why I think we have the MVPs and Microsoft's invested in the community is because they kind of understand that own, like, in a sense, organic ecosystem, so to speak. So don't be afraid to look for mentorships, especially if they're at your own job, if you can identify one.
I will say this about Microsoft MVPs, or just MVPs in general that I've experienced. A lot of the MVPs are very busy, is what I would say.
So don't reach out to Mike.
Well, you can. It just, you may not get a response. Don't be offended if you don't. But I feel like MVPs are very engaged with community. Try and meet them where they're at. So if they're speaking at an event, appear, right? If they're doing some other things, like engage initially that way to start forming some of those relationships. But I would also echo too, MVPs are a great opportunity. There's actually a lot of other really smart, very sharp people in the community that are not MVPs and potentially should be. They just don't have what I would call, like, part of being an MVP is having a casting a wide audience around whatever you're working on, right? So I think there's a lot of people that are just crushing it, doing really awesome things in the community. It's just maybe a little bit harder to find them because Microsoft's not pushing as much.
I don't think I know that, right? Like, we're a very small subset of delusional individuals that, like, love
Power BI,
constantly talking about stuff or doing things and putting stuff out there. But also at the same time, like, a lot of MVPs are the group organizers, right? It's the community aspect where, like, you will find technical professionals in any one of these communities, right? And they are likely going to have much more time around specific needs. Like, mentor to me is a kind of a bigger deal, right? On the realm of, like, we are already, like, well established and we have relationship that's standing, and
that's a good point.
There's a specific thing that you want to get better at, that person is an expert in, or you just really admire, and you want them to help kind of guide you and has a specific outcome, right? So in this realm with collaboration, though, like, it's not that heavy. It's like a mentorship is consistent. It's typically meeting quite a bit, like talking about objectives, helping you think through processes, and then that person going and doing things and trying to elevate themselves in their career, et cetera, et cetera. Collaboration is more around, like, hey, how do we do something together? I'm passionate about developing this report around, the Yankees. Hey, Tommy, I know you love them, right? Like, what you want to get together and
let's have dinner. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, let's talk about this stuff, right? Hey, you're passionate about this thing, or, I love Mike, like, Mike, your way you introduced yourself to Rui. It's like, hey, this guy's already got a bunch of stuff out there. I'm gonna go put myself out there first and help him with his projects that he's doing, and engage in a relationship there first.
Yeah.
And by doing so, hey, there's this other ancillary thing that I'm working on too. Are you interested in engaging in that? Right.
Yeah.
And that's where like the parts in here where being specific about what type of collaboration you're looking for, right? Be set up your expectations, understand, like convey the limits as far as like what is it you expect from this other individual, right? And making sure that it is mutually beneficial or that's something that they would be interested in before you go do that. And what does that require? You're the first person you meet that knows Power BI is probably not going to be the person that you want to collaborate with. You need to
Yes.
to get into these communities
Yeah.
where you see a wide spectrum of how people are thinking about things. What are their backgrounds? How are they working on Power BI? Like, and that a lot of that happens in like a user group setting where, you know, like the way we run things is like afterwards there's a Teams meeting, right? Who's showing up on video? Who's asking questions? Hey, tell me about, you know, what's going on. What are you guys working on? Et cetera, et cetera. Like float those questions out there. And a lot of times people are like, oh yeah, I work in administration all the time. And this is what we do and how we do it. And then that way you start to develop those relationships. But all the while, right, you can be strategic about like how you're engaging with communities because maybe you want to collaborate with somebody, right? But ultimately, the funny thing about it is it's going to expand or add value to you even before you get to the collaboration because you're getting out there in the community, you're talking to other people, and there's a ton of value in that, which all of us agree with.
I slightly want to shift in terms of from community to within your organization, where I think if you can identify someone in your organization to collaborate with, regardless if they're even in the Power BI space, whether it's a project you're building, you know, like you are building a project, but it's someone from another department to collaborate on, can be so fruitful. But there's more than just the benefit of, I think, just the article of I'm learning, I'm getting a new skill set. You're also identifying people at the organization and what they do in terms of who can I reach out to for this? Who has some sway here? And I think there's a big part of that. It's not necessarily always guaranteed you're going to find people willing to, or that have, in a sense, the necessities. But if you can find people in your organization like, hey, we're working on this report. I know you don't do reports, but I want to get your feedback on this. And one part of the building the relationships at your organization, but also understand that like almost let me help you, like I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. There's a lot of benefits there that honestly I really just want to emphasize that it's not just community where collaboration can happen. And it doesn't have to be just you're a Power BI guy, I'm a Power BI person. Great. It can be someone that knows or has a skill set or has knowledge in somewhere in the organization you don't.
And I think if I think about the broader community, right, the community of practice around Power BI, this fits very well with that. And honestly, if I'm not trying to put my Power BI administration hat on here too much, but this is an activity that you want to encourage in your organization. And I think this should be an activity that is somewhat led from the Center of Excellence. The Center of Excellence should be providing opportunities, call it challenges, lunch and learns, Power BI, power hours. Like there needs to be some sort of space inside your company to find these like-minded people, because people just won't naturally sit down to each other at a lunchroom or whatever. If your company's big enough, I don't know if you have a lunchroom or not, but if you sit down and you just won't find these people and be like, oh yeah, hey Tommy, I didn't know you were in finance. Oh, you're doing Power BI report stuff? Okay, interesting. What are you working on? And that's a really great opportunity where you can say, well, Tommy's like, I'm struggling with these DAX things. I'm trying to build this, profit and loss statement. How would I do that? And I got an idea. And I heard something here. And then you add value to their project or effort. And that's where you can really start forming relationships across business teams. But the point here that I want to make is the Center of Excellence, or the leadership team of what's going on in Power BI, they should be driving these opportunities to the organization and making sure people have the ability to find other like-minded people, because they're there.
Yeah.
Data Dojo. Yeah, James, you're perfectly right. Like it's just the same concept.
And I think part of this, like some of the most fruitful projects I worked on were came from something completely organic. It was someone, a vice president of sales, who built a relationship with, and they understood what I did. They kind of became the liaison for sales, and it happened from organic conversations. And it's part relationship, but part collaborating. Like, rather than going into this, like, you're the BI person, I need a task. Just talking, having the conversations is part of the collaboration. So, and I agree, and I think that needs to be fostered more. Where again, your service, your support, you build a report.
Yeah, I think for I like the points, right? Yes, absolutely. Within an organization, COE or business intelligence team or data dojo, whatever you want to call it, like could definitely create these opportunities for collaboration, and that collaboration or that project could be very company specific, right? So that there's already that mutual together, like, hey, we're going to go do this thing together because it's going to benefit the same company we work for, etc. One of the call outs I do want to make before we have to wrap up is some of the pitfalls that she calls out to avoid. And I
would get to that too.
Over time, these are some really good points.
Yes.
The first off, while reading these, is what I've seen is that because you're passionate about something, it may not be that anybody else is, right? and that
true statement.
That union of a collaboration is such that, like how she outlines, is both of these people were very interested in doing this project together, right? Just because you're interested doesn't mean that the person who may have those technical skills is. So her 3 points are: don't make others responsible for your project, which you should never have an idea and then just like, hey, I found a person who's going to help me, or like offer into this thing, and then it's just this one-sided, like, wait, where are you kind of thing. Collaboration is not a way to get free help or work from a professional, which is a solid one, because
I've seen that before.
In there, it's like, well, if you're asking them to do something that they get paid to do,
you should get paid.
Typically want to get paid to do that thing.
Yes, exactly.
True.
Right.
Very
and
true.
This is where
time is a resource.
Right. I made that point earlier about it's got to be mutually beneficial. Like people have to want to engage in something together to go attack a collaboration. And then her final point is, this is not a fun. This is not a fun only zone, and we know that. Everything you do has a cost, and typically that cost is time.
Yes.
And the more things you do, the less time you have, right? So this is where Tommy, I think you already made the comment, right? Like, people are busy, like, and the more visible people are, or the higher you go in an organization, or you run your own company, like, we're probably some of the least, like, have about the least amount of time to give as possible, which is why it's so great to, like, get into a community of people, whether that's at work or whatever, in these frameworks, that, like, you guys are probably have more time together than the people that are leading the group or bringing all the people together or doing the speaking, etc.
This is why we only talk on a podcast together.
Because why I'm not calling you at 6 in the morning.
7:30 in the morning.
We don't have any time to make a phone call. We just get together on a podcast and talk
get
about
ready
stuff.
For your morning calls. Well, I can't emphasize enough that it does have to be mutually beneficial. As much as people want to help, it's not all altruistic, where if you just come to someone and go, I want you to do this, or hey, help me do this, and there's not, in a sense, perceived benefit for the other person, it's not really collaboration. And that person's probably not going to be as willing to help. So that can't be emphasized enough. Collaboration is that relationship building for both people.
How many times have you been hit up on LinkedIn and be like, hey, Tommy, I have
my data model.
Yeah. I have this data model DAX question. Can you help me out? I'm like, well,
have you done your research? Have you looked in the community? Have you?
I don't even answer.
PowerBI.com.
My rate is, here's my rate.
Yeah. Well, I literally didn't even get, hey, Tommy's like, I have a DAX problem. I'm trying to do this. Not even a, hey, how are you doing? Yeah. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Don't do the sales tactic that apparently is really popular lately, which is, I have no idea who you are. And it's like, hi, Seth. When this week can I schedule this 10 to 15 minute meeting?
All
to talk
the
to you?
stinking time.
You can't, and we
ignored.
Won't, because
thanks, ChatGPT. I don't want your.
Well, I will. I'll give LinkedIn some credit. LinkedIn is doing a much better job of being able to tell, like, have that little auto prompting that says no thank you, and then
Yeah.
what I usually do, someone will respond to me and they'll ask me a question. I'm like, hello, I'm so glad I'm so glad we got an introduction. And then it'll be like, okay, I don't respond. And then like a week later, like, oh, hello, I'd like to schedule a meeting with you. Can we schedule a meeting? And then the automatic prompt actually shows up that says no thank you, and then I click it and then I move on. So if I don't respond unless the automatic prompts are there,
it's just like
I don't have time.
Develop relationships there.
And correct. It's, don't come out of the blue and try to like, you need to have the relationship there first. Well,
but I do want to make one point here though.
Sure.
When you put in this work, finding the right people to collaborate, and this show is an example of that, is one of the most rewarding things. It can be extremely fun for as much work as is involved to put together a project or something that you're doing together with people. Finding the right folks, putting together and doing something collaboratively, it can be one of the most rewarding things you do. So it is definitely worth it. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to, find the right folks and get it off the ground running. But if you have an idea and you want to run with it, definitely, I would suggest it's definitely worth it. And I think I can say definitely a lot more times.
I think you should say it one more time.
Yeah,
I definitely think that's needed more in your sentences.
You definitively agree with my definitely?
I definitively agree with your definition of those definite statements.
I think you're correct.
I think the best Dr. Seussing of things happened yesterday with Emily on the podcast.
Oh yeah.
So if you want to data Dr. Seussing,
someone should snip that one.
3/4 the way through. Yeah, where was Kratos on that one?
Yeah, we need to snippet that one. Can you model on a plane? Can you model on a train? I think that's kind of where we went with that one.
I can model on afar. I can model in a car.
Can you model in a car?
Yeah.
I can model from afar.
Exactly. I think this is going to be a thing.
Maybe that was it.
I think it's something around that. Anyways, what does ChatGPT say today? So today our question for ChatGPT is list three methods to find people to collaborate on a data project. So one would be online platforms and communities. There are numerous online platforms that you can go look at. We kind of got there as well. Yep. Professional networking events and conferences. I don't think we talked about conferences, but I think I found a lot of really interesting people at conferences.
Yep, agree with that.
And I would also say that's maybe where you'll find those experts that are not MVPs potentially, because people are going to see
learners.
Other people. Yeah. They're learners, and they want to go learn something about that conference.
We built ALM Toolkit before it was actually an app. He packaged it up as when it was just got on GitHub at a conference.
Yeah.
Someone I met there, it was phenomenal.
See? Yeah. And then the third recommendation was look for people on social media and online forums, utilizing social media platforms like LinkedIn, Twitter, and Reddit. And Reddit, I will say, is a very fun community. The Reddit community around Power BI is kind of fun. They keep throwing out memes every so often. I dig those memes. So those are enjoyable to say the least.
Episode 50.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. See episode 50 where we talk about memes you can't see. Tommy's favorite topic right there. We'll probably have to do a revisit on that one because there's so many good new memes that are out there that we'll talk about.
When we get to 500, I'll
when we get to 500.
Pre-announcing episode 500.
Pre-announcing episode 500.
well
the meme episode.
That's gonna have a high attendance. We've already sold it. Get your memes now. Episode 500. And write it down, Tommy. We're gonna have to do it if we ever make it there.
Oh, that's good.
Excellent. So with that, you've wasted a perfectly good hour with us. It's been a lot of fun. Great conversation. Hope everyone can find someone in a community or get plugged in somewhere. You already are plugged in with our community, so thank you very much for listening. Our only ask is to go find more people. Share this podcast with other people. Let them know that you found some value from it. We'd love to have more people participating, chatting, and engaging with these kind of topics. It's not hardcore Power BI stuff. It's kind of that the water cooler conversation around Power BI things. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find the podcast anywhere it's available, Apple and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe. You can listen to all of our previous episodes, and you can also leave a rating. Helps us out a ton. Finally, join the conversation live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central on all of PowerBI.tips social media channels.
Excellent. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next week.